My guest is Noreen Gosch. Mrs. Gosch is an author. We'll tell you how to get her book a little later on in the program. She is also a mother, and she is with us this morning, especially in that capacity as a mother. Mrs. Gosch, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. So do we, I can assure you. Now, Mrs. Gosch, is the man known as Jeff Gannon, whom we now know is originally named James D. Guckert, is this man who for the last couple of years apparently has been coordinating a homosexual prostitution ring within the White House of George W. Bush, is this man your son, Johnny Gosch, who was kidnapped off the street of Des Moines, Iowa, where you live, in 1982 while he was delivering the Des Moines Register?
At this time, we do not know if Jeff Gannon is Johnny. We did approach him and ask him for a DNA sample so that we could do a DNA comparison. And he wasn't cooperative. Then later, on a television show, the Bo Dietl show on MSNBC, about a month ago, he stated before everyone watching that he would take a DNA test. Then, a couple of weeks after that, it was communicated to me that if he's going to do a DNA, he wants to be paid for it. In other words, paid for the DNA sample. And so at this point, we do not have that as yet for any testing to be done. There are a lot of similarities in the appearance of Jeff Gannon and the features that my son had. And so that is probably what has caused everyone to feel that it might be him. So unless we get the DNA, that would be the only real conclusive test that would tell us.
Well, if this man, Jeff Gannon, or Jim Guckert, whatever his name is, if this man really were your son, if you really were his mother, would he be demanding a fee from you to take a test to prove it?
Well, one wouldn't think so, but I don't know what all has happened to him in the years that he's been away from, our family.
According to the Register, the Des Moines Register, according to the Des Moines Police, there is absolutely nothing to the contention that this man, this homosexual prostitute, Jeff Gannon, Jim Guckert, could be your son, Johnny Gosch, kidnapped in 1982 and now grown up. Where did this theory...
I wasn't aware that the Des Moines Police have conducted the DNA then, because they didn't come and ask for any of mine. That's the only way that it's really conclusive. You see, Jeff Gannon, has the same birthmark that my son has, too, in the very exact location my son does. And that is what has made it so suspect, and that's why we asked for the DNA. The writer that wrote that article for the Des Moines Register, she's normally the gal that does the entertainment pieces.
Yes.
And they put her on this real serious story. There was a huge uprising in Des Moines after she wrote that story because people felt that she was not experienced enough to write a story of this caliber with this kind of an investigation because it was not her background. It was not her thing. And she put a lot of erroneous statements in there and then went to just the Internet and copied off sections off of web pages and printed it.
Again, this is the reporter at the Des Moines Register.
Yeah, that's correct. And so, unfortunately, that article does not represent really what is going on with this particular situation. And I have not heard one word from the Des Moines Police at all. And the only way to really tell in a situation like this would be the DNA test.
Now,
and Gannon did agree to it on national TV.
If
and then
you
it
pay
was
him
2
a
weeks
fee.
later that he said he wanted to be paid for it. So something happened in the interim.
Yes. How much does he want for the DNA test?
He hasn't named a figure. He just said he would like to be paid for it. So we are working with that information. I have investigators that are helping me. And we will see what happens with that situation. I'm not sure which way it will go. If he was throwing this up as maybe a delay in the process, I don't know why he would, but that might be the case also. It's hard to tell what's in the mind of another person.
When did you first become aware, Noreen Gosch, of the possible connection between your long-lost, kidnapped son, Johnny Gosch, and this man we're talking about, Jeff Gannon?
I was contacted by an Internet investigator named Andy Stevenson from Seattle the first part of February. Gannon was outed at the White House right around the 25th, and he was on a CNN news program, Anderson Cooper's show. And apparently, folks that saw that show thought that there were a lot of similarities between features on my son and Jeff Gannon. And it wasn't too long after that, just maybe about a week and a half, they contacted me and asked me if I thought Jeff Gannon was Johnny Gosch. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I hadn't seen the show. I wasn't aware of Jeff Gannon at all. So finally then I had to wait a few days before anyone sent me photographs. Then we could begin our own process of comparing aged photographs of Johnny, photographs of Johnny when he was little, photographs of myself that would have some of the family's characteristics and features against Gannon's. And then it was approximately a full 3 weeks later before I learned about the birthmark that was identical to Johnny's. And
now, what is that birthmark? Could you describe it for us?
The birthmark on my son is in the shape of South America. It's on the left side of his chest. And it was it wasn't a red birthmark. It was one that was just a darker pigmentation. So it would get very, very dark and brown, for instance, if he was out in the sun. And there were photographs of Gannon without a shirt on that showed this mark up on his upper left chest. So that's why we asked for the DNA. And we sent 2 different men to his apartment to talk with him. They identified themselves as being there on my behalf, and when they began to ask him about the situation, he became angry and slammed the door in their face. Then it was a few weeks later, he was on the Bo Dietl show, and that is when he agreed to take the DNA and to be cooperative. And it was since that time that the word has come to us that he would like to be paid for it.
No.
So as far as what's happening with him, I don't know what's up with that. I really do not. I'm trying to figure it out as we go also with the help of investigators that are trained in this. It's a very strange circumstance.
It's incredibly bizarre.
It is.
We're talking about a man who may have been kidnapped at the age of, was it 12?
No, Johnny may have been kidnapped. He was kidnapped.
Well, didn't I just say that?
You said he may have been kidnapped?
No, he was kidnapped. I see what you mean. I misspoke. He was kidnapped, but what I mean is he may have been this young man who was kidnapped. He may be this young man who was kidnapped, now grown up. And if this connection is true, he's your son. It's the most bizarre behavior in the world, a son toward a mother.
Now, we know that Johnny was put through a mind control program after he was kidnapped.
How do you know that?
That's already been established, and it was already given in court documents during a federal court proceeding February 9th of 1999, and the judge ruled that all information given was the truth on Johnny's case.
What was the nature of that court hearing, Mrs. Gosch?
I beg your pardon?
I say, what was the nature of that court hearing?
A young man by the name of Paul Benassi, who is the one who originally confessed to assisting in kidnapping Johnny, gave us names of parties that participated, and explained exactly how everything was done, what they used him for, and about the mind control program. This young man was also sexually abused by the same person who was on operating this prostitution ring, and that's what they were doing. They were taking kids and using them for prostitution, and my son was one of them. The young man, Paul Benassi, filed a lawsuit against the man who injured him and forced him to work with them in luring young boys to the car. And that's how they did it. They used a kid to lure a kid. He was able to file a lawsuit against that man for damages done to him. The judge made a federal ruling. It was Judge Urbaum in Lincoln, Nebraska. The judge handed down a federal ruling saying that Benassi was telling the truth about my son's kidnapping, his participation in it, and what all transpired with Johnny. And Paul Benassi was awarded $1 million in damages.
So then is it possible that this man, Gannon Guckert, is your son in a now grown-up and completely brainwashed condition, which could explain his bizarre behavior?
It could very well explain it if it is Johnny. And
now, as
like I said, I don't know
correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Gosch, as I understand it, you were visited by your son he was kidnapped in 1982.
Correct.
In 1997, he was kidnapped, he was 12 years old, so he would have been born in 1970. As I understand it, he showed up at your place and visited you at your home in 1997. Is that the case?
Johnny was born in 1969, November 12th,
okay,
and kidnapped in 82. And in 1997, he did come to my home in the middle of the night for a very brief visit. During that visit, he gave me information